The crowd pressed around her like waves, relentless and heavy. She stood at the edge of the train platform, clutching a small leather suitcase that smelled faintly of old rain. Her fingers were pale, trembling, not from cold, but from the quiet storm inside her. Somewhere ahead, the train screeched, a metallic scream that made her heart jump. She didn't move. She couldn't. Her gaze had locked onto them. They were laughing, loud, careless, oblivious. Their voices carried across the station, brushing against her like a winter wind. The man's jacket was sharp, his watch glinting under the harsh station lights, and the woman's heels clicked against the tiles with a rhythm that was infuriatingly composed. And then the words hit her like ice. Honestly, our new place? Way over your head. You wouldn't understand. Salary-wise, it's a different league. Her grip tightened around the handle of the suitcase. A red scarf slipped from the side pocket, its edges fraying, fluttering against the wind like a heartbeat. She didn't notice it at first. She was too busy watching the subtle arrogance in their posture, the way they didn't even notice her, a silent shadow at the periphery. The wind snatched strands of her hair and whipped them across her face. She brushed them away, eyes narrowing. Every laugh, every casual boast, carved something deeper into her chest. Her hands shook, slightly, almost imperceptibly, but enough that the coffee in her cup rippled like a restless sea. The announcement echoed over the station speakers, indistinct but urgent. Train arriving on platform 3. People surged forward and she stayed rooted, a quiet island in a storm of movement. The suitcase at her feet felt heavier all of a sudden, as if it were absorbing her anger, her determination, her quiet, simmering thought. They don't even know me. They won't see it coming. Her eyes flicked down at the red scarf again. It was just a scarf, frayed and ordinary, but somehow it carried weight, a promise she didn't yet understand. She tucked it against her chest, and for the first time in hours, she felt a strange clarity, a pulse of something dangerous and sharp in her veins. The train doors hissed open. The crowd swallowed her, but her eyes stayed on them one last time. They didn't look back. They didn't know. And that was exactly how she wanted it. A part of her wanted to run, to disappear, to let it all drift away. But another part, a colder, steadier part, had already started moving. Something was about to shift. She could feel it. The suitcase felt heavier with every step. She moved mechanically through the crowd, letting her eyes drift over fleeting faces. Children clung to parents, laughing, while couples held hands like fragile promises. She tightened her grip on the leather handle, the red scarf brushing against her wrist, and remembered her father's words, spoken years ago on a similarly cold morning. Don't let the world measure your worth. Measure it yourself. She hadn't fully understood then. She had only been 7, dragging a tiny worn bag through a bustling airport, holding back tears while her father's job sent him to another city. Back then, the bag had felt impossibly heavy, and yet she had carried it alone, thinking that was strength. Now the memory settled around her like dust in sunlight. The red scarf in her suitcase, it had been her mother's, left behind after she vanished quietly one winter. It was soft, fraying at the edges, and smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. More than a scarf, it had become a talisman. Every fold, every thread whispered that she could endure, that she could fight without shouting. She thought of the couple again, their arrogance still fresh in her mind. She hated them, yes, but she hated the part of herself that wanted to crumble under it even more. Bills piled at her apartment like silent accusations. Every day she counted pennies, sorted out what she could afford, and dreamed of proving herself. Not for them, but for the echo of that small stubborn girl who had carried bags far too heavy and survived. Her gaze flicked to a stranger seated nearby, watching her. He didn't intrude, didn't speak, but his silence felt deliberate, as though he understood without asking. She felt a shiver run down her spine, half discomfort, half curiosity. People rushed past, but he remained a quiet presence, a shadow that mirrored her own hidden tension. The train slowed again, the brakes screeching like an argument. She paused, glancing at the platform signs, her heart beating unevenly. A memory surfaced, her father handing her a coin for the first time, saying, "Make your own path." Don't wait for someone else to hand it to you. She had dropped it once, heart racing, afraid she'd lost it forever. Now the lesson was clear. She would take what she needed quietly, cleverly, without announcing it. The red scarf slipped slightly from her suitcase, catching a gust of wind. Her fingers twitched to fix it, but hesitation held her back. Something about the stranger's steady gaze, the hum of distant voices, and the swirl of her own thoughts made her stop mid-step. A train whistle cut through the station. People surged, doors opened, and she froze, caught between movement and stillness. The stranger's lips curved into the faintest, almost confused smile, as if he had seen the storm inside her and didn't know whether to warn her or watch it break. Her chest tightened. She couldn't turn away. Not yet. Something was waiting, but she didn't know what, or if she was ready. Rain began as a whisper, soft droplets pattering against the metal roof of the station. She barely noticed at first, lost in the swirl of people and her own thoughts. But the stranger caught her eye again. His coat was worn at the elbows, and she glimpsed a crease in his wallet as he fumbled with it. Inside, a photograph peeking out. A child? A woman? She couldn't tell, but the careful way he fingered it made her stomach twist. Something in that small, deliberate motion mirrored her own habit of clutching the red scarf. A silent reflection. Both of them guarding fragments of their lives that no one else could see. Her chest tightened. A mix of recognition and unease prickled at her skin. He had his own battles, quiet and invisible, yet somehow shared with her gaze alone. Thunder rumbled overhead, distant but insistent, like the warning of some approaching reckoning. The crowd blurred around her as she stepped closer, drawn by curiosity she couldn't name. Part of her wanted to flee, to dissolve into the noise, the rain, the anonymity, but another part, a colder, calculating part, kept her rooted. She studied his shoes, scuffed at the toes, evidence of miles walked on hard pavement, the sort of miles she herself knew too well. Life had never offered them shortcuts. She wondered what choices had hardened him, what sacrifices had carved the lines in his face. She sensed a story, maybe as messy, as raw, as unforgiving as her own, but it remained locked, folded into small gestures, into the way he didn't meet her eyes too quickly. Lightning fractured the sky, illuminating his face for a fraction of a second. She caught it, the tension behind his calm, the half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Was it curiosity, pity, or an unspoken warning? She couldn't tell. Her pulse throbbed in her ears as if the storm inside her were echoing the storm outside. Every instinct screamed that she should step away. And yet, there was a magnetic weight to him, a pull she could not name. Fate? Chance? Or something sharper, more deliberate? The questions tumbled, heavy and unresolved. Her fingers brushed the edge of her suitcase, the red scarf damp now, clinging to her wrist. She wanted to shield it, to hide herself, to vanish into the storm. But she also wanted answers. To see, finally, if someone else had walked through the fire she knew so well. The rain grew heavier, drumming against the platform, drowning out the hum of voices. She shifted, hesitating. Every step forward felt like crossing a line, yet every step back felt like surrender. He watched her without moving. His silence was steady, intentional, and for a single electric moment, she felt the invisible tether snap taut between them. A flash of lightning illuminated his face again, and then nothing. Just the rain. And she remained caught, suspended, unsure if the next choice would save her or destroy her. She almost turned. The crowd pressed around her, faces blurred in rain-streaked windows, strangers moving with their own urgency while her heart waged a quiet war. Every instinct screamed to vanish, to run from the tension that hummed between her and the stranger. But something made her pause. Something in the way he held the photograph from earlier, the careful tilt of his head, the faint crease in his brow as if the world had worn him down piece by piece. And then she saw it, the red scarf caught in his fingers, wet from the rain, frayed edges pressed gently against his palm. For a heartbeat, the suitcase in her grip felt heavier, the scarf's presence in his hand magnifying everything it had ever meant. Survival, stubbornness, quiet defiance. A memory rose unbidden, of her mother's scent clinging to it, of her father's words murmured in airports long ago. Some people carry more than just bags, they carry silence. Her fingers itched to reach out, to reclaim it, or to leave it there as a test, as a challenge, as a confession she couldn't speak. She stepped closer, then stopped. Her eyes flicked to the strangers in the background, a mother tugging her child, a man in a suit shaking a colleague's hand, all observing her without looking directly. Their quiet judgments pressed against her skin like invisible fingers. She felt naked under it, exposed but also alive. The stranger's gaze met hers briefly, and she could see the mirrored struggle in his eyes. The restraint, the hesitation, the weight of unsaid words. She wanted to ask him, what do you carry? What makes you move forward when everything else says stop? But the words stuck in her throat, lodged somewhere between fear and curiosity. Rain soaked her hair, plastered to her face, but she barely noticed. The suitcase swung lightly with her sway, each step punctuated by the muffled rhythm of the platform. She could almost hear the thunder echoing her own heartbeat, loud and erratic. She opened her mouth to speak and then shut it again. One step forward, one step back. The scarf fluttered slightly in the wind, held in his careful grip, like a promise she didn't yet understand. A soft, almost imperceptible sigh escaped her lips, blending with the station's hum. He didn't speak. He only watched, silently offering space for her to unravel, or to decide that she wouldn't. The tension stretched taut between them, a wire humming with anticipation. She almost walked away. She almost let the moment dissolve into the gray drizzle of reality. But she didn't. She stopped. Just once. And she let herself look. One last look. And the rain carried the rest. The station lights flickered, reflecting off puddles like fractured glass. She had barely registered the soft hum of the departing train when he spoke. Finally, a low, deliberate sound that made her jump. "You've been carrying that scarf for a long time," he said, not as a question but as a statement. Her fingers tightened around the suitcase. It's nothing," she murmured, though the words tasted hollow. He shook his head, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "It's not nothing. That scarf belonged to my daughter." Time stopped. The rain seemed to soften, the platform falling away as her mind clawed to piece together the implication. The red scarf, the one she had thought was a relic of her own past, a talisman of her survival, had belonged to someone else. Someone lost. Someone he had carried silently, like she had carried her suitcase, like she had carried her quiet defiance. Her thoughts flashed to the phrase her father had said years ago, in that cold airport. "Don't let the world measure your worth. Measure it yourself." Now it echoed differently, refracted through the weight of the scarf, through the knowledge that lives intertwine in invisible ways. She felt the resonance in her chest, a loop connecting past, present, and this moment, an unbroken thread of fate. Then came the second revelation, sharp and jagged. "I'm the owner of the firm you applied to," he said, watching her face carefully. "You've been under my radar without knowing it." The suitcase seemed heavier all at once, as if the rain had filled it. Every choice she had made, every small victory and quiet struggle, was suddenly amplified. The stakes weren't just her survival or pride anymore. They were entwined with someone who wielded power she had only dreamed of confronting. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She couldn't retreat. The moment had passed. There was no going back to anonymity, to the quiet life of counting pennies and keeping invisible promises. She had reached the point of no return. Emotion surged, fear, determination, curiosity, and something fragile and dangerous that resembled hope. The crowd blurred, the rain pattered, and she finally moved. Her suitcase swung by her side, the scarf tucked securely now in her palm as if anchoring her to this new, unpredictable reality. Every step felt charged, weighted with meaning. The door ahead loomed, polished wood reflecting the station lights, leading to an office she had dreamed of entering from afar but never imagined facing like this. She hesitated for only a heartbeat, then pushed forward. Each step echoed, each breath measured. And the world she knew, the life she had carried silently for years, shifted irreversibly. The platform was empty now. drenched in rain and washed in the golden light of the departing sun. The train had gone, leaving only the echo of its brakes and the scent of wet metal. She stood where she had first seen them, the arrogant couple, the whispered judgments, but everything felt reversed. She wasn't the shadow anymore. She had carried herself through the storm and emerged raw, steady, and unflinching. The stranger stepped closer, his coat still damp, the photograph of his late daughter tucked safely into his wallet. His eyes met hers, searching, measuring, and for a moment she saw not desire or pity but recognition, of someone who carried survival like armor. "I chose you," he said quietly, not for charm, not for comfort, but because she reminded him of someone lost. Someone irreplaceable. Her chest tightened, but there was no thrill, no romantic surrender, only the sharp clarity of being seen, understood, and needed in a way she hadn't anticipated. The red scarf slipped from her fingers. She let it fall into his palm, rain soaking its frayed edges. The weight of it, the memory of her mother, the echoes of her father's words, and the invisible lineage of care, was now in his hands. She gave it freely, a surrender and a gift, the symbolic object completing its arc. It wasn't hers to carry anymore, but in letting it go, she reclaimed herself. For a moment the world seemed suspended. The stranger's lips curved into a faint, almost melancholic smile, and she understood that this wasn't about winning or losing. It was about closure, acknowledgement, and the quiet power of being chosen for reasons that transcended vanity or fortune. Her suitcase remained at her side, worn leather-soaked but lighter now. Each step she had taken, every penny saved, every silent endurance, it had all led to this intricate intersection of lives. She could step forward, step away, or step into the unknown. She chose the last. Thunder rolled softly in the distance, echoing her heartbeat. She didn't look back, but she didn't walk blindly either. The rain-slicked platform, the station that had first been a cage of humiliation, had become a stage of rebirth. The small suitcase and frayed scarf, once symbols of struggle, now marked the threshold of transformation. The stranger didn't follow. He stayed, an anchor of quiet observation, letting her step into what awaited without expectation or claim. She understood that some encounters were not about possession, they were about reflection. She drew a deep breath, shoulders squared, eyes forward, and walked into the street where the city waited with indifferent hums and neon glows. The rain had stopped, but her world was irrevocably altered. And in that moment, as the scarf faded from sight and the suitcase's weight became memory, a line lingered, fragile and haunting, like smoke curling through the empty station. Not every stranger you help is meant to stay, but some leave you changed forever. The morning sun filtered through the apartment blinds in soft golden slats, cutting across the wooden floor where the small leather suitcase had been set aside. It had been unpacked, each item carefully placed, the red scarf folded neatly into a drawer, resting beneath the light as though finally at peace. Its edges, frayed and damp once, now seemed quiet, gentle, a memory rather than a burden. She walked slowly through the kitchen, feeling the cool floor under bare feet, tasting the silence that filled the apartment like a soft hymn. Outside, the city moved in its usual chaos. Honking horns, hurried footsteps, laughter and arguments mixing like a distant symphony. But inside, she carried a calm she hadn't known before. The storm of yesterday had passed, leaving her sharpened, alert, alive. The memory of the stranger lingered, not as a presence to cling to, but as a reflection, a mirror of someone who understood the weight of survival and the quiet courage of choosing oneself. Sometimes love is not romance, it's recognition, she whispered to herself, letting the words settle into her chest like stones smoothed by years of water. She paused by the window, watching people cross the street below. Arms full of groceries, children skipping ahead, couples leaning together as though the world were theirs. She smiled faintly, not out of longing, but from acknowledgement. She had been part of that world and apart from it at the same time. She had carried her past, and now she could carry herself. The suitcase remained near the door, a testament to journeys taken, battles endured, and choices made. The scarf, tucked away, waited quietly for memory to stir it once more. There was no need to revisit its story, It had done its work, both for her and for him. She sipped her coffee slowly, feeling the warmth seep into her hands, the steam curling like smoke around the edges of her thoughts. There was freedom in the ordinary, the quiet clink of a spoon against the mug, the sunlight catching dust motes in the air, the faint hum of the refrigerator. Her eyes drifted toward the drawer where the scarf rested. She thought of the train station, the rain, the stranger's silent gaze, and of herself, silent, trembling, determined. And she understood that life would continue, unpredictable and unyielding, but she was no longer simply carried by it. She could choose. And as she stepped into the soft morning light, letting the world brush against her like wind through hair, she whispered a line to herself, half question, half revelation. Some journeys do not lead to where we want, but perhaps to the parts of ourselves we needed most.